Let's see. All right. Good afternoon. Checking to make sure we are unmuted. Happy Tuesday it is. And I can't believe it's already October. I'm Dr. Maisha. For those who don't know who I am, I'm the owner and founder of the Mind ReMapping Company. And I teach the tools of conscious communication and emotional intelligence through teaching NLP and hypnosis and NLP coaching. So today, it's interesting. I'm a person who I see a lot of a relationship between things that I'm creating here, and that then the universe shows me what's next. And so I've been talking a lot about communication, but also I talk a lot about, for those of you who listen to me, who listen to my podcast, who have listened to me do lives, I talk a lot about my child, my son, and the impact of my of the conversations we have, and my teaching in conscious communication with him. And what's very interesting about that is that um, I have discovered in this process that one of the things I'm very passionate about is making sure that children know the tools to empower their own minds. And as I have done this work with my son and had these conversations with my son, I'm seeing the impact of that. And so there are some things that I'm moving towards doing in order to bring this conversation to a bigger audience, and perhaps into schools. However, what I want to talk about today is, how do we do this? What are the ways that we can empower the minds of our kids, and why it's so important to do that? So yesterday, my son came home and he shared with me. He says, Mommy, I have to tell you something. And it's really important. I need to tell you something. And so, of course, whenever he has to tell me something, period, I listen. And whenever those words come out of his mouth, but also whenever he says it's important, I really pause and listen to what he's got to say. And he said, and my son, by the way, he tells me pretty much everything, which is something that I'm very grateful for, because it allows us to be able to dialogue about the things that's going on with him at school, the interactions that he has with his friends and with the people around him. And so he says, this girl called me dumb at school today in aftercare. It was a fifth grader, and she called me dumb. So of course, I always inquire first. And I said, well, how did you feel about that? And he said, well, it really bothered me. I felt a little bit angry, a little bit sad. She called me dumb. And then, so the next question I had was, well, do you believe that you're dumb? And he says, no. And he says, but it really did make me feel bad. I said, I got that. That really was not a nice thing to say. It was a mean thing to say. So the first thing I did, of course, was affirm what he was feeling, really honor what he was feeling. And the question was twofold. The question of, do you think you're dumb, was twofold. And that was, number one, to get a sense of where his own belief system lays. And even though, or lies, and even though I know that, I tend to have a good read on his belief system, I always check in, because I think that's one of the things that happens that disconnects us from, especially as parents, from what's really going on with our kids, is we don't ask these questions. We don't create safe spaces where, number one, we can ask the questions and they'll really tell us. And also, maybe we're just so busy trying to take care of the bigger things, like, keeping our kids fed, keeping our kids clothed, keeping them educated, keeping them safe, especially in this environment, that sometimes we forget to check in and to have these important conversations and get the experiences, the real experience that our kids are having. And so that's why I asked that question, because I always want to check in. And from time to time, I ask questions like this, right? To check in with where the belief system is, because when we can really assess and clock where the belief system is, then we can actually begin to brainstorm ways to shift that and empower that. So, of course, In that moment, my question, was, well, it, what did you say to the person? And he said that his response was he told her to be quiet, and then he, went and he talked it out with another friend, and kind of, I guess he got himself empowered, a little bit empowered in that moment. But I asked him, so what, what is something that maybe you wanted to say that you didn't say? What is something that you could have said that maybe you didn't say? And we sat down and we had a conversation about, now that he believes he's a smart person, that he believes that he's intelligent, and that somebody else said what they said. What are some responses that he could give to be empowered in that circumstance? That was one conversation we sat down and had. And in the other conversation, or the other underlying theme in our conversation, was that sometimes what other people think is not important, if as long as what you think about yourself empowers you, right? And so, um that was a conversation that we had as well. And I think, the reason I share this is because I think that with social media and with bullying and even cyberbullying, especially in children my son's age, he's 8, he'll be 8 in a couple of weeks. Those first 10 years are sponge years. But even so, even after that, the teenagers and even young adults can be very impacted by the opinions of others if they're not already grounded in who they are and in themselves. And so it's just really, it's never too early, I feel, to begin empowering our children, empowering the belief systems of our children about themselves, and teaching them how they can reframe things and empower their own minds, so that when they go out into the world, because we all know that when we are out in the world, there are people out there who are not that nice. I mean, just just in social media, you can see it. If you read comments of any, influencer out there, and it is that, or non-influencer, people will say, they will say mean things hiding behind a device. And then there are people who will say mean things to your face. They will say mean things in earshot of you. They will, there are all of these dynamics that happen. And to be grounded in oneself and who you are, and then have the tools to communicate in a young person, to start to develop that early, gives them such power, to be able to not only, choose their battles, choose when they feel like they need to say something and when they just brush it off, but also even in circumstances that are not conflict based, to give them the confidence to be able to express themselves to their teachers, to their principals, to their peers, to express themselves honestly and transparently and authentically, right? So I think that is why teaching these tools is really so important at an early age. One of the major things that I teach my son to do, that I do with my son constantly over and over again, is reframing. And I may or may not have talked about this skill before, but reframing, while it seems simple, is an extremely powerful tool for a child to know, to be able to empower their mind. And why is that? It's because when you reframe a thought or a behavior, or what someone says, when you can reframe that, you're changing the meaning of it, or the context in which it's applicable. So, for example, my son, and I always will use my son. Someone once told him that he talked too much. And he asked me, do I talk too much, mommy? And my answer in my head was, not all, sometimes, but not all the time. But what I said to him was, well, there may be circumstances where talking a lot is very useful. There may be circumstances where negotiating and being able to talk, especially when you're talking in front of people, is very useful. And there may be circumstances where it's more useful to listen. And so it's not a matter of whether you talk too much or talk too little. It's more of a matter of when it's most useful for you to use that your voice and when it's most useful for you to use your ears. So just distinguishing that with him, right? Was a reframe, and it takes the onus off of something's wrong with him and puts the and shifts it to, oh, when is it useful to use my voice and when is it useful to use my ears to listen? And so little reframes like that, you can change the meaning of something. If my son says, "Oh, my legs are sore after kung fu," I say, "Well, that just means that you're building muscle," right? Your legs are building muscle. So there's ways to like change the meaning of something that they're experiencing. And so when we start to just this one technique, right? There's many others. I use anchoring with my son, and anchoring is just a way that we use a stimulus response to help people to enter a more resourceful and positive state in the moment. So I teach my son. There's one in particular thing that I taught him was this. When he was testing and feeling nervous, is how to enter a positive state during that point of testing. It's a circle of influence. I mean, the circle of excellence, excuse me, the circle of excellence. So when we teach those little tools of where we can have our kids, number one, reframe negative thoughts into resourceful thoughts, and also to be able to help our kids to enter resourceful states whenever they need to, so they can be their best self in any situation. And then these are the things that have them feel grounded and powerful and confident, moving in various situations, moving in their life. And so I could talk all day about these various techniques, but I just wanted to share that having these are very simple things that you can actually do every single day with your kids. So the next time, and this is whether you're a parent, whether you're an auntie, uncle, whether you're a teacher in the classroom, and especially for teachers in the classroom, educators, um, after school programs, these are the kinds of things that we can model. And I'll say something about that. Like, there's a difference between teaching, like having to teach them a technical tool, and also modeling that tool through interaction and conversation, and also modeling it by modeling it in our own situations and circumstances. When our kids see us reframe things for ourselves, then they pick that up unconsciously, that this is a way that we can empower our own minds. When in interaction with another student or an adult, a kid is able to experience a reframe, experience that type of shift, then they pick that up as a tool unconsciously. And then they will, if done enough times, begin to replicate that. So now in the car with my son, in conversation at the dinner table, my son, if he expresses a problem, sometimes he will reframe himself. He will recontextualize or change the meaning of something that previously maybe made him feel some kind of way himself, into an empowering context. And sometimes I sit there in awe and like listen to him when he does this, and then I can affirm him like, "Wow, you solved the problem all on your own without my help." And he said, I did that one time, and he says, "Yeah, sometimes I can do that." And that is the type of confidence that I want all children to be instilled with, right? These and in order for them to learn it, we must model it. We must um, we must model it. We must interact in that way. We must teach it. So that then comes back to, well, how do we learn it? How do we acquire these skills? And that's by learning these tools of conscious communication, learning to be more emotionally intelligent. And it's not a destination; it's a journey. It's an everyday thing. So then my invitation to you is to begin to listen to your own thoughts and your own communication, and listen to and practice reframing. Practice the art of and the tool of reframing whenever you hear a negative self-talk come into your mind, or whenever you say something about yourself that doesn't empower you, or whenever someone else says something about you, you can reframe someone else's criticism into a resource. Sometimes it is reframing our own thoughts, but sometimes someone says something to you, um, about you, that isn't true, or it may feel like, but you, in your mind, it's not true. You can actually reframe that, reframe them in the moment, while at the same time, when you reframe someone out loud, you're also reframing yourself to reinforce the resourcefulness of whatever that is. And that's not to say we don't take feedback, because feedback is valuable. It's to say that we have to continue to model these skills of empowering our own mind, so that we can interact with our children in that way, and empower them to learn these tools. So with that, um, I'm going to stop here, pause here, because you know me, I could talk all day about this kind of thing. But I would love to hear your thoughts about how you empower the children who are in your life, the children whom you influence, whether it's in the classroom, or whether it's, auntie uncle style, or grandchildren, or you're a parent. What are the ways that you do, and what are the ways that you see that you can, and how will you take on just the one tool of reframing as you interact with your kid on a day-to-day basis? All right. I would look forward to sort of hearing some comments, or hearing what you're taking away from this. And we'll continue to talk about communication, because, as I always say, everything happens inside of communication. Things get created, things can be, destroyed. But more importantly, things can be, visions can come alive, and things can get created and manifested through communication. And that's internal, and that's external, between each other. Bridges can get built through communication. So I'm committed to that. And of course, if you want to know more about the work that I do, um, teaching neurolinguistic programming in my individual certifications, NLP coaching, you can reach out to me. If you're on LinkedIn, you can direct message me. If you're on Facebook, you can direct message me. If you're um, here on Instagram, you can do the same. You can message me, or you can, in any of those platforms, go to my website and feel free to book a discovery call with me, so that we can talk a little bit more about how it might benefit you to learn these tools yourself. All right. And if you're an organization and you want me to come do a training, I'm happy to do that as well. I do lots of trainings on conscious communication, and bringing making communication, moving communication from transactional to relational. So, with that said, I bid you a good adieu, and hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day and a rest of the week. All right. Take care, y'all. Namaste.